Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Sad Times, where I speak this way for 2 to 3 sentences and then never speak this way again until the beginning of my next episode. My name's Kevin. I'm your host. Thanks for joining. For those of you who have never been on listening to Sad Times, or been on it, I guess, Sad Times is a show where we have a guest on every week where they talk about any number of things, realizations in their life, times that they went through some really shitty stuff, what they took from it. The goal here is for people to tell stories so that people who are listening at home can feel a little bit less alone and say, hey, wow, I thought I was the only one who thought that, etc. We have a really cool guest today we're going to get to in just a moment. Before we do need to get to our sponsor. Our sponsor is stock characters in insurance commercials. Who are we talking about? Well, let's talk about the grandfather who is wearing a veteran's hat and turns and smiles and salutes the hero of the commercial, an amiable and kind woman who's talking about all the ways she is still on that insurance. Or perhaps the neighbors. Look at them at the grill, he minding the burgers, she being pregnant, accentuated by the fact that the baby is going to be covered by the insurance. Wait, let's check. Is Grandpa still there? He is, and he's saluting in a hat. Definitely still a veteran, though perhaps with a saluting problem. That's stock characters in insurance commercials. We spell it out for you. All right. As always, please support our sponsors. Use that code FAKE at checkout. That's FAKE. It'd be great. All right. So let's get to it. We're going to get to our guest. His name is Andy. Andy, how's it going, man?
Good. How are you today, man?
I'm doing all right. Just thinking about insurance commercials. Do you, I watch, Cubs baseball on on an app of the Marquee Sports app, right? And it'll just play the same 4 fucking commercials over and over again, so I have them all memorized, and you can't fast forward. So that one has been stuck in my brain, the insurance commercial.
There's your first issue. You're watching Cubs baseball.
Watch your fucking mouth, man.
I went to a Cubs Brewers game recently.
Who won?
The one that they lost in 11. By they, I mean the Brewers.
Boy, we tried to give you that game too. We were up 6-0.
Yeah, you know what? It was. The problem was I was sitting with Cubs fans. That I dated a woman from Chicago. Her son's a Cubs fan, and then we sat on the third base side, so I had to be around Cubs fans, and of course it's at Miller Park. And that it'll always be known as Miller Park.
Not American Family Insurance or whatever the fuck it is now.
Garbage. Yeah. Also, people from Chicago call it Wrigley North. And the problem is when they start yelling "Go Cubs" and take over the stadium, it's defeating. And I don't even give a shit about baseball. I could care less. I'm not a baseball guy. I don't find it. I will say, since they instituted the pitch clock, the game went faster. It mathematically went quicker and it was more watchable. Also the mound visits when they're up there in 20 seconds and the ump is coming up.
The ump walks up like, "What are you fucking doing, man?
Like, what are we doing here? Are we doing a pitching change or are you going to get back to the game?" Because these are your two options. The game actually went smoother. So I will say MLB, you did right by that. The issue I have is the fact that Cubs fans, it's like they live and breathe and die by the 162 games of baseball, and that's it. I feel like you should have more into life than how your team does. And I know this, being a Packers fan, I used to be upset every Monday for years.
Yeah,
because of what was done. Yeah, up there at Lambeau Field.
Well,
so
Andy,
I get it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it. I get it. And the challenge of the difference is there's 16 games of football, right? That's 16 bad Mondays. Baseball is 160. That's half your year that you could be down or up based off of a baseball team. And the problem is, too, with Chicago fans, the problem and the beautiful thing, it's all the same thing. They are diehard. You can have a terrible team year after year, and you're like, yeah, that's my team. Almost any other city, like to Tampa Bay, fair weather. They don't give a shit. If they win it, they're in it. If they're not winning, they don't care. Chicago fans, on the whole, love their sports teams.
Yeah,
and they will clinch on to every level of success. Like the Bulls are still one of the greatest dynasties of all time, and they haven't been relevant for 25 years.
Right. Well,
and yet they had a great decade.
Well, yeah, God played for the Bulls for a while there, and it was fucking amazing. And Andy, thanks for coming on Don't ever speak that way about Cubs fans again. Goodbye. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm a huge fucking Cubs fan. I hear what you're saying. I love the season. It's kind of like the novel Lonesome Dove, okay? One of my favorite books ever. That book's about 800 some pages, and I wanted it to be about like 1,700 pages. I want the baseball season to be all year long. It is regular. Here's a fun thing about the pitch clock. This year, I believe the average time length is like 2 hours and 33 minutes. In 1976, the average was 2 hours and 26 minutes, which is fucking crazy, right? So I was a bit skeptical of it, but I'm with you on that. Also, fuck the Packers. Okay, so we're having you on here today. You have a book called Words Fucking Matter. Fuck being your second favorite four-letter word. We'll get to the first one a little bit later. Fuck is probably my first favorite, but the book is called Words Fucking Matter. We'll have a link for it in the show notes. It's Retrain Your Brain to Use Language That Serves You. Before we get to the book, I want to talk to you. You say very early in the book, you refer to yourself as a rough and tumble, mouthy kid. Tell us about what you were like as a kid.
That I have been saying for 30 years now that my mouth writes a lot of checks that my ass eventually has to cash. and I'm 6'4", 225 pounds right now. I'm a full-size man. That was not the case growing up. I didn't hit my growth spurt until like sophomore, junior year of high school. So I was all in grade school, I went to Catholic grade school. I was the smallest kid in the class, the smallest or one of the smallest kids in class. And I wasn't athletic. Music or, all the things that like you strive to be good at growing up. I wasn't those things. However, I could run my mouth and I stood up for myself and I talked a lot of shit. And that got me into some very precarious situations because I never backed down from a fight. And when when fights went from verbal to physical, I often had no problem throwing the first punch. I would be lying if I said I threw a lot of the last punches.
Yeah.
So rough and tumble was people would pick on me. I'd run my mouth, physical altercation. I ended up on the bottom of the pile. However, I never turned down a good fight. And at 39, the truth is, the fact still remains. I wrote a book called Words Fucking Matter. I mean, I'm looking to pick fights, initiate conflict with people because that's where meaningful learning occurs. And that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah, and you repeat a lot through the book. I'm going to not say it exactly how you say it, but basically like the only way we're going to learn is if we fuck up, and you have to put yourself out there to fuck up, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about you spent 19 years in the military. Is that correct? Yep. And so you talk very early about the power of service. So talk about, kind of take us through a little bit of your military journey, and then we'll pick it back up once we get, and then we'll discuss further once we get to your time in Guantanamo.
Yeah, I joined the Army, and I wanted to join because I thought that's what it meant to be a man. And so I was like, I'm going to join, and I'm going to go to war, and I'm going to kill somebody. And then I checked the box of I'm a man. And then I went to war, went to Iraq, and came back home and realized that ain't the answer. The idea of war is not the answer, and neither is this idea that going out there and killing somebody makes you a warrior, makes you a man, makes you a good person. There's I wouldn't say a good person, but makes you a man, right? This idea that I was striving for masculinity, and I didn't find it there in the military. And what I did find in the military, which was interesting, is this notion of selfless service. I thought a leader was someone that yelled and screamed and people followed them, and it's like, no, a leader is someone that is empathetic and understanding and does the thing, right? Is willing to do the thing, and then others follow. And so when I was in basic training, at the end of the basic training, there's 7 Army values, and they look at the whole company, about 180, 200 soldiers, and say, okay, which soldier exhibits this? We'll use
exemplifies.
There we go. Exemplifies. That's the word I wanted. Exemplifies.
Words fucking matter, Andy.
Words do fucking matter. Pronunciation also matters. Exemplifies these Army values, and I was chosen by the drill sergeants as the selfless service soldier that I exemplified that value. And I'm like, I thought in my head, I'm like, I'm just doing the work that nobody else wants. I'm standing up for those that nobody else stands up for, So I got that Catholic upbringing, eventually, paid some dues that I'm like, I'm a decent person. And so then moving forward into my military career, I ended up attending a school. I was voluntold to go to the school called Master Resilience Trainer.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is stupid. It's just, horoscopes and horse shit and whatever. They're going to teach me how to be a better person. Because at that point, it was kind of a dick. I was a leader. I was kind of an asshole. And I was, I was the do it because I told you to, and no other reason. And I went to this school and I realized quick, fast, in a hurry that my thinking is what got me into all the good things in my life and got me into all the not so good things in my life. And so that was really the basis for me to be like, okay, I need to learn to be a better person. I have to learn about myself. I have to learn how I show up every day. And then I have to look back and reflect to say, okay, did this serve me? So really the 3 steps to that was self-awareness, self-regulation. Because I grew up always with like this idea of self-control. My mom would always say, you self-control. I'm like, that's bullshit. Why would I want to control myself? I love myself, right? I'm, a proponent for everyone is awesomely unique in their own ways. And then the word regulation is different than control, because control says, hey, we have to dial you back. Regulate is, no, we have to dial you in. And those are 2 very different things, because sometimes regulation means we got to turn it the fuck up, right? Sometimes you got to get fucking loud. You got to get aggressive. And other times, right, let's regulate back for the situation. And then the 3rd step is self-reflection. People often say, well, is this going to work out? It's like, well, I don't fucking know. Well, let's run the play and see if it works out. And only in retrospect can we see, okay, did the way that I handled the situation work out the way that was better for me or worse for me, positive or negative? I like to avoid the words good and bad for the most part, because it's lazy speak. It's really, really easy, right? Another word I eliminate, easy, to say good or bad. It's different to say, okay, is this positive or negative for my life? Because you have to go then back at me, because what might be good for one might be negative for somebody else. And there's that old adage, like, things work out the way they do, often not the way we anticipate them, and often better, right? So we look at trends, is this better for me or worse for me? And that's more interesting to me than good or bad.
Okay. So, and what you're saying, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-reflection, it obviously you have to have overcome some sort of fear of failure. Have you ever had a fear of failure? Was that something that so how did you, but in order to do those 3 things that you're talking about, I believe you have to be accepting of failure.
You got to be really good at it. And the way you get really good at something is by getting in the reps. And that's it. Someone from my life recently reached out to me a couple weeks ago and just said, hey, how do you get over, like, because they want to get into business. They're like, I keep writing business plans and I never get to that execution phase. And I was like, well, you lean into it. Lean into the failure. And when you fail forward, right? And that's not an original thought by me by any means. There's an opportunity to fail forward. I talk about this in the book, right? We make choices. Sometimes those choices work out. Sometimes they don't. And when they don't, you get to make a second choice. Did I learn from this or did I not learn from that? And that is a choice that only you can make. And so you have those 2 choices. And when you make a choice and it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, what did you learn from it? And now take that learning and step off again. I did one of my first keynotes I ever did. It was 90 ideas in 90 minutes. And so it was 10 speakers, or it was 9 speakers. Everyone had 10 ideas. So I had 10 ideas. So I used 10 words because I broke it down Barney style, because 10 ideas is a lot of ideas. 10 words, not so bad. And then I broke it down into sections of 3, because 3 is the everything in my life revolves around 3. Anyhow, I talked about the hustle, the struggle, and the grind of life. And the hustle is endure the hustle. That's when you're climbing up the mountain.
Yep.
Embrace the struggle, which is a play on words of embrace the suck, which is another military thing. Because right when you're at the cusp of greatness, that's when you got to dig in the most, right? So you got to learn to embrace the suck. We do that in the military. So I say embrace the struggle, because struggle is real, and let's acknowledge that it's a failure. And then finally, enjoy the grind. The grind is that when you're coming off that peak and going down, what was it all worth it? And here's the opportunity: when you choose to endure the hustle again, you're already way ahead of where you were before. A lot of people have this notion that I'm at rock bottom. Well, no, your rock bottom has more dirt below it than it did before, because of all the lessons learned. And I remember the first time I did my keynote, I said this, and there's this woman, probably mid-30s or so, off to my right, and she looked at me in that moment in time, I'll never forget. She's like, I never thought about it that way. Like, in that moment, there was this connection we had, and in that time, I said, okay, there is power in the words. There is power in this notion that rock bottom is you're still farther along than you were before because you failed. And it's like that was one of those keynotes where I'm like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you talk about you use the phrase rock bottom in the book when you're at Guantanamo. Yeah. So tell us you tell us about what that rock bottom was and kind of what caused it. So kind of what brought you into it and then how you started to come out of it.
Well, I caused it, right? I'll say that right off the bat. Utilizing Victor language. I caused it. And what happened was there was a series of events that I had direct control over. And ultimately I broke Army standard. I was not loyal to a leader. Mm-hmm. Loyalty is not a strength of mine. I talked about those 7 values that the Army has. Selfless service is me. Loyalty, no, I'm not loyal.
But you wouldn't say that loyalty is one of your weaknesses, though, would you?
No, because we don't have weaknesses.
That's
we
right.
read about that in the book, right? We have strengths and we have things that aren't strengths. So loyalty is not a priority to me because it's just no different than people that stay married forever to someone that treats them like shit. It's like, no, you got to choose your spouse every day. And if your spouse doesn't choose you, well, let's get God and government out of this relationship and move along our business, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so in the military, I was not loyal to a leader. And I told a subordinate that said leader didn't know how to do her fucking job. And so there was an investigation on me for one thing. I was accused of being sexist and racist. Turns out I was an asshole and it was equal to everybody. However, during the investigation, it came out that I was not loyal to my first sergeant. And then when I was questioned about, I was like, yeah, no, she doesn't know how to do her fucking job. And I made that very clear that I refused to follow her more or less. And that's a no-go in the military. And then I got removed from I got demoted, removed from my platoon. I was a platoon sergeant, and now I was a squad leader in another platoon. And I was a squad leader of none. I was in a squad by myself, which is not military protocol whatsoever. And then soldiers saw that I stood up for myself, and they started coming to me. So then I took that information from all those soldiers and myself, and I went to IG, which is the Inspector General. That's like the internal auditing system of the Army. That's the, hey, go here and tell us what's going on and we'll fix it. Kind of whistleblower, safe space, if you will. Systems are only as good as the people that run the systems. So I sent an email on a Sunday, and on Wednesday I was removed from my company.
Wow.
And that's typically not how it goes, right? So it's like, I thought it was bad, and no, it got worse for me. And so this is what's going on in the foreground. This is what I'm in somewhat control of. In the background, I'm 1,000 miles away from my more or less estranged wife. She decided when I was away at training in the Army that she was going to move across state lines and take my daughter. And I didn't stand up for myself or my daughter and stop that from happening. So that happened. So now it's like I'm not.
How old was your daughter at the time?
Oh, not even a year. She was born in May, and I deployed in October. Mm-hmm. So I put so much stock into titles at that time. So it's like, well, I was no longer a father because my daughter was not there. I was no longer a husband. I was unemployed because I quit my job before I deployed, and I was all in on this. I'm going to be a fucking leader in the Army soldier thing. And now they're like, yeah, no, you're not. And the way you're doing it isn't consistent with the way that we want you to do it. So we're going to not only kick you out of your platoon, we're going to kick you out of your company. And then the company I got assigned to no fault of their own, is like, yeah, fuck you. We got no loyalty to you. We got you for the next, 3 or 4 months, and we're going to use and abuse, your skill set and your rank. And then I even caused problems there because I spoke up for myself again, right? Like, there's a theme here. Andy runs his mouth. That's a theme. And sometimes it gets him to great spots, like being here on the Sad Times podcast. And other times it got me into not so great spots. Mm-hmm. And then what ended up happening was I waited through all this shit, and all the soldiers that came to me, they saw me. There were soldiers when I stood in front of my formation and more or less like say, hey, it's been an honor serving you, da, da, da. I had like people watching me to make sure I didn't say the wrong thing. Right. And there were soldiers in my formation that were crying because I was their guy. I was, and they saw that it was some bullshit. And it's like, I stepped off, I kept my head held high, and I didn't stop doing what I was doing. I kept running my fucking mouth, and it kept getting me in trouble in the Army. And then finally I get off, get through the deployment. And at the end of the deployment, the first sergeant and the commander both got relieved, and I got promoted. So it's like, well, okay, right? I learned to fail and I continue to fail and I continue to fail forward. And I was consistent with what I did. I was consistent in bringing up what I thought were, or not even what I thought were, I was consistent with bringing up situations that were against military doctrine. I brought up things that were morally, ethically, inconsistent with what the military preaches. And it worked out. I had to fail a whole bunch for the system to work out. Like, I was also up for re-enlistment after this. I had about 11 years in the Army, and I could have got out at that point.
You re-enlisted though, right?
I did, because although the system sucked and did not work, it eventually worked. When we came back from deployment and there was an investigation done, it was like, oh, hold on. We did have some failures here. These leaders were not consistent with military doctrine. Yeah, they got to go somewhere else.
So you talk about fail forward. I want to ask you about that, because I think where a lot of people get stuck, myself included, right, is yes, you fail, you learn from failure. It is our greatest teacher. But people get real down. And you say later in the book, you said wallowing in perceived failure. So how do you keep yourself going as you're failing, as you say, failing forward? I mean, you had to have times, you also talk about doubt. That's more when you're talking about starting a business. But like, did you have what they call dark nights of the soul, where it's like, maybe I'm fucking doing this all wrong? And like, how did you, with your way that you are now using language, how would you use that to help your cause?
I had those thoughts yesterday.
Yeah,
I have those. There is this imposter syndrome. Like, oh man, I'm out here faking the funk. Like they're going to find me out, right? There's this self-doubt.
Yeah.
There are days. I own a business. I own a junk removal company. That's my discipline. I got about 15 employees. We did about $2 million in revenue last year. We're on track to do about the same this year. We got 20,000 square foot warehouse. I got 12 trucks. Like, I got all those things. And there are days where I'm like, fuck, what would it like to have a job? What is it worth all the stress? Is it worth the struggle that I'm going through? Mm-hmm. And then I think, okay, well, let's look at the alternative. What is the alternative? Right? Instead of sitting here worrying, instead of having doubt, well, what's the alternative? Well, I'd have to wake up every day. I'd have to put on somebody else's uniform. I'd have to think a certain way. I'd have to act this way. And it's like, yeah, fuck that. Right. Right. So it's like, yeah, no, the alternative sucks. So, right. I have to make money. I have to make a living. I get to, not have to, right? I get to own a business. I get to make money. I get to pay bills. I get to pay taxes, right? I get to do all these things because I live in this amazing place called America, where I have the freedom to do those things. So it's like, okay, let's use, information to quell the doubts, right? And then
let's use information to quell the doubts. I like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So what I call it is the triple D, right? It's the data-driven decisions. Often what people will do is they'll make a decision and then they'll find data to back it up, i.e. every religious or political argument there is, right? It's like, this is what I feel, and this is the quote in the Bible that absolutely articulates my feelings and thoughts on this one matter. It's like, well, no. How about go collect a bunch of data from a bunch of sources and then see what the data tells you and then make a decision? And that's where people often fail. So it's like, here, I'm spiraling. I'm thinking twice about running a business, right? Well, it's like, oh, let me go collect some data. Well, it's like, okay, I've been in business for 7 years. Most businesses don't make it past 5. We're successful. We have money in the bank. Okay. For the most part, the employees are happy. They show up to work. We have 700 reviews. With a 5-star rating. I'm an industry leader with my podcast. So it's like, oh shit, look at all this data that I have that shows that, yeah, I do have doubt. Yeah, some days I suck at being a business owner. And I also have all this data that long-term shows, it tells a different story.
Right.
So humility is something I struggle with. Humility is my 24th strength on out of 24.
Right.
Right. And it's like, it's this weird paradox that I live where I am confident in my approach, and I am also, I have self-doubt. And so humility is like that beautiful place where it's like, oh, let's really think about how I can be a better person. And I struggle with that. So I have to put a lot of effort into that to get what other people would get results much simpler. So it's like, okay, now I'm aware of that. What do I do about it?
Yeah, you say if you give your mind an inch, it goes a mile. especially when accentuating the negative, which, hey, buddy, if that's the case, I'm running fucking triathlons 14 times a day. Well, triathlons, 3 things. I'm running Ironman marathons 14 times a day because my mind is going like fucking crazy. But you said a moment ago, I want to call this out. You started to say, I have to this, I have to this, I have to, and you said, stop, I get to. And that brings me to one of my favorite chapters in your book, which is a list of shit words that do not serve, which is and it's called an anti-glossary, which I also love. So the first one that you talk about is busy. Tell us, let me just read a little bit from this, okay?
Please.
Busy doesn't take skill. Busy is a state of being, not an action. It's wheel spinning. People take pride in how busy they are, checking emails, updating social media, and so on. We live in a world where you can be busy all the time. Being busy for its own sake doesn't bring about any tangible results. It's a trap. So we're going to get to your favorite 4-letter word here in a little bit because you do a really nice job of contrasting that with the idea of being busy. Yep. What are some other words that you have here in this, the shit words that just do not serve?
Well, so the other thing, so let's go back to get to versus have to.
Yeah.
Right. That is regulation, right? Because and some people will give me shit. They're like, you're the guy that says words fucking matter, and yet you said this. It's like, yeah, I still use limiting self-language when I'm not using the top of mind, right? When I'm using my fear-based about my lower lizard brain, right? So so what I was doing there is rephrasing.
Yeah.
Get to versus have to. Have to is an obligation. Get to is an opportunity, right? So I get to do all these things, and I didn't know where that sentence was going. And I was like, well, why do I get to do all those things? Oh, because the alternative is I live in a country where I don't get to do all those things.
Right.
Right. And we can think about, right, let's imagine what that looks like, right? If I was in Ukraine right now, I wouldn't be able to get to run my business. I would be serving on the front lines, and maybe I would get to live that day. Right. So it's like, oh, okay, well, I have it pretty good right here. So that's later in the book is, when we're thinking about things in the future, are we driving optimism with our language, or are we not? Are we driving pessimism? And optimism is we get to do things. Pessimism, I have to do things.
Isn't it interesting? Real fast, you change one word from have to get, and then it produces something like perspective, which often 100%. Feels like it's so far away. But if you change one language, or excuse me, one word in the language, your perspective changes.
What we're talking 1 degree here. 1 degree. If you look at all the words I'm using in a paragraph, it's like, well, right? I was going to say if, when, there's another good fucking word because if is a shit word. When I change my language by 1 degree, it forces the end of the sentence to reconform to a thought of empowerment. So another word, like you talked about, another word that a lot of people use that I did not grow up with and I find to be appalling, or it's a stupid word, is the word sorry.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Let's do it. So here's why. Yeah. Sorry focuses on the past. So let's do this. Let's play real-time exercise. You give me a sentence that you often say, or say, apologize to me for something, and let me rework that sentence.
Okay. I'm sorry that I grew so frustrated when you told me that news.
Okay. So sorry I grew frustrated when you told me that news. Okay. Hey, thank you for your patience when I was frustrated.
So do you still think that there's contrition in that?
Define contrition.
Well, fuck. I mean, I could pull it up. Sorry. In my brain, I'm thinking contrition, saying I'm acknowledging that I did something wrong.
Great. You're acknowledging it either way. You're acknowledging, right, the act. Your lack of patience, right? Thank you. What did you say when I blew up at you? More or less?
Just like when I grew frustrated when you told me that information.
So either way, you're acknowledging it. You're acknowledging I grew frustrated, right? Because here's how the sentence goes otherwise. Hey, sorry I grew frustrated, right? It won't happen again. Mm-hmm. Or the other person says, no, I forgive you. Well, now you don't have to do it ever again. But when you said, hey, thank you for your patience when I did this, now all of a sudden you're thanking them in the moment, and now you're more or less forced to talk about, well, what's the future going to look like? And the other person can say, yeah, you know what, you're welcome. It was difficult. You also frustrated me, and then I felt myself getting hot. And then you say, okay, well, what do we need to do, or what do I need to do to ensure that doesn't happen again?
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're doing is you're giving gratitude. Right, there's all these. If you read all the bunch of psychological literature, they talk about how gratitude And the more gratitude you give it, it releases the chemicals in your head because you're thankful. It's like, okay, so instead of having this doubt or frustration with yourself, because sorry is like this, hang your head, oh, I'm sorry I did that. I can't believe I acted that way. No, hey, thanks for your patience. Because you know what? You're a human. I'll give you the grace that you're going to get frustrated at times and you're going to fuck things up. So now you're more or less asking for grace by saying thank you for your patience. Thank you, right, for waiting, right, versus saying, hey, sorry I'm late.
Right. You use that a lot in the book. The sorry I'm late. Thank you for late. And you say, oh, because of traffic or blah, 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 blah.
Oh, correct. Because now here's the other thing. Okay, now because of traffic. Because now you could take, now we're talking about victim language versus victor language. So I'll use that example, right? Hey, sorry I was late. Well, it's like, how sorry are you? You're fucking late, right? It doesn't change the fact that you're late. So sorry doesn't change the state of being, in the sense that you were not where you said you were going to be at a given time, right? Fine. So someone will say, hey, sorry, or that, this is where I use the comma but. You used comma but earlier in our talk here. I was going to stop you, but you were, and I was going to stop you. However, right, you were on a roll, so I didn't stop you. So when we talk about but, for example, someone will say, hey, I wanted to be on time, but traffic was really bad. It's like, okay, well, when you say but in that sentence, you're dismissing the whole first part. So it's like, yeah, I wanted to be on time. Okay. Well, you've now dismissed that by saying, but traffic was bad. When you flip-flop that sentence, you now take ownership. Traffic was bad and I wanted to be on time. And it's like, okay, you wanted to be on time. Traffic's going to be bad. What are you going to do about it moving forward? Because there's nothing you can do about it now. You can thank them for their patience, or they could tell you to fuck off and not be there. And you missed an opportunity because you missed the opportunity by choosing not to leave early, by choosing to take the route you took. You said all these contributing factors.
Okay. And I want to go back to sorry, because you said you grew up and that wasn't a word that was used.
No.
Nobody apologized, or like how was that dealt with? Was it with the thank you, with the gratitude and what you grew up with?
No. It was a lot of people not acknowledging their feelings in my household. That's how we grew up. We grew up with deal with it. Stop doing that. You know what I mean? It wasn't right. That's the other thing. If you look at the shit words that do not serve, I give alternate courses of action. Mm-hmm. That's the goal here. It's not like, hey, this word is garbage, never use it again. On to the next point. It's like, well, that doesn't serve, right? It's better to reward and give positive direction and reward, right, than it is to constantly point out the negative. There's study after study that shows that, right? You want to change people's behavior, encourage them on what they're doing versus going after what they're not doing or what they're doing that you don't like. So consistently encourage positive behavior. And so when it comes down to like a sorry, for example, right? It's like, hey, thank you for your patience. So it's like, well, let's focus on, well, now we're both being patient, right? I'll give you the grace to get frustrated, and I'll be patient, because in the future, when I'm frustrated, my expectation to a certain extent is that you show me the same grace.
Okay. So I hear you.
In our household, we didn't use sorry, and there wasn't an alternative. So it was
just move on. It was just a lot of
move on. Yeah. Get over it. Oh yeah. Yeah. The traditional, move on, be tougher, be stronger.
Are you from, right? Did you grow up in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Outside of Milwaukee.
Okay. So here's another one that you have in here, in the shit words that don't serve you. The phrase, it's 2 words, my truth.
Oh yeah. Fuck your truth.
Yeah. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, because truth, there's this idea that now you take ownership. My truth. You're now taking ownership of facts and the truth. Issue I have with that is it's been prevalent the last few years. When you say my truth, you're at that point, most people are being dismissive of any other fact about a situation. And there was someone on Facebook recently who argued with me on this, and that's one of my favorite things to do, is to argue with people about words, because it gives me more perspective from others. The truth is, you have a perspective, my opinion. Fine, those are great from your perspective. Which right now, if you say my perspective, it's like, okay, well, what are you looking at it from? What lens are you looking at it? Because now I can join you. In the military, we call it a fighting position. It used to be called a foxhole, but it was offensive to foxes, apparently. So now we use fighting position. So from my fighting position, this is what I see. And someone else from another fighting position can be looking at the same field and see something different. And that's the reality of life, right? Like, okay, on 4th of July when the Brewers lost to the Cubs, right? From your perspective, a Cubs fan, that was a good thing.
It's a great thing.
Great thing, right? From my position, being from Milwaukee and despising the Cubs, it was a bad thing, right? So your truth, right? You say, well, my truth is that the Cubs winning is great for everybody. It was like, well, no, fuck your truth, right? From your perspective, yeah, you're a Cubs fan, you're wearing the hat, you're doing the thing. Got it. So the problem is with my truth is we've now seen it in all these political arguments where people are dismissive of other people's perspectives. There is no my truth. You don't own the truth. You don't own facts. And people at this point are so blind and ignorant to the world around them because of my truth. Fuck your truth. Your perspective, fine. Because once you say my perspective, now you're acknowledging that other people have other perspectives.
And it's interesting because I think if let's say you're having that conversation outside of a podcast, you're at a bar or whatever, you're talking to somebody and they say, well, I'm offended by that. Now, you and I have talked about this a little bit. Tell me about how you respond when somebody, like if you said to me, Kevin, fuck your truth or fuck the Cubs. And I'm like, well, I'm offended. What is your response to
that? You have the right to be offended and I have the right not to care. Bill Burr does a bit on this. He's like, all right, you're offended. Okay. And I don't have to care. Right. So Bill Burr does that bit. I always tell people the same thing. It's really, this is my perspective. You can be offended. Doesn't mean I'm offensive. Because, so for example, if I have the American flag tattooed on my arm, that offends some people. I don't think it's offensive. Other people put we just got through June, right? June, Pride Month. Some people are offended by the gay pride flag. Are those people being offensive? Not necessarily. They're flying their flag. Other people are offended by that. Doesn't mean they're being offensive. So it's like, and then July comes and it's all about America, right? And now we fly the American flag and some people are offended by that. Anybody can be offended by anything and nobody has to give a shit. So fine, from your fighting position, you're offended. Go tell it on a fucking mountain. If nobody's listening, that's a you problem.
Do you ever, but when you say, yes, I offended you, I don't have to care. Do you ever struggle where you do worry that you've offended people and you do care? No. You don't. No. Have you ever had that?
Sure. If I say, when, let me say this. When I say something, I say it and I mean it. And now there's times I've said things and it's bothered people or offended people. And then I'll ask, okay, well, why? What was it? And then it's either a miscommunication, right? It's like, well, that's not the way I perceived what I said, right? Or it's like, oh yeah, you know what? Moving forward, I'm not going to say it again.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like for example, the R word. We'll use this as a pretty good example, right? The R word is a pretty prevalent word used in the military for in every variation thereof that word. And I use it, and I've used it in my life, all my life, right? And I started dating somebody who has a niece with Down syndrome, and she said that word offends me. That bothers me. I don't like it when you use that word. Sounds good. So I choose not to use it anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because, okay, I am now regulating my language given my audience.
Okay.
I've admitted no fault. I'm not saying I was offensive. She was offended by it, and I choose different moving forward.
Is that kind of like, so when you say you choose different based on your audience, is that like because you're empathetic to where they're coming from?
Yeah, because it's, let's look at a hierarchy. What's more important in this situation? Me using a somewhat derogatory term or me connecting with somebody I'm dating?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty obvious. It's like, what's more important? It's like, are you willing to die on that hill? Also for me, like this is nothing to do with language, it's more relationships. Being on time to me is not important. Never has. Our family was not on time. We were the ones that rushed into church, and found whatever spot in the pew, whatever. We were not on time. My mom and dad are not on time people. And that's it. So, and I'm not an on time person. Now the military forced me to be on time. Okay. So I'm not generally speaking an on time person. The woman that I date, she is an on time person. It's very important to her that she shows up on time. So it's like, all right, I'm not going to go out of my way to show up late. If we want to show up on time, fine, I'll show up on time. Now, the flip side, when we do things that are around my life or my family. Hell, I was late to my own book launch party because she got up to my warehouse later than expected.
When you got to the book launch party, did you say, "I'm sorry, the traffic was bad"?
No, absolutely not.
Well, come on now. That would have been funny.
That would have been funny. No, no. You know what? What it is I've used the same line for years. I fucking love this line. It's I always show up when I arrive.
I always show up when I arrive.
Right?
What was it Woody Allen said? 90% of anything of success is showing up or something like that.
Absolutely. Right. And Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, one of his first lines is, "A wizard always arrives on time."
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because being late is subjective to the person that is determined, right? Or it could be objective, right? If we both mutually agree to meet at this time and you're not on this time, okay, well, then you're late. Look at us. We're on the podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be on this podcast. You and I talked last week. We said 11 o'clock. So at 5 to 11, I had two choices. Do I go downstairs and make another cup of coffee and run the risk of being late, or do I get on the Zoom? Okay. I filled up my water bottle and I got on the Zoom.
Right. So, okay. Some shit words. You have can't, won't, and don't. And I want to stop with can't, because can't is a word that I use all the time unless I'm feeling fancy, and then I say cannot.
Ooh.
And yeah, I know. Fucked up, man. But you said something in here that is very true, and I have fought this idea a lot. Mm-hmm. But when you say can't, won't, or don't, it is true. Because you're saying I can't do that. Okay, that is now true. Talk about what you mean by that.
So, and also to preface it, it says I can't, won't, don't. So it's not like we don't use the word can't, won't, don't throughout language. We do not begin a sentence. It's kind of like thinking, talking, trying. I am thinking, or I am thinking, talking, trying. Those are we eliminate those at the beginning of a sentence. So I can't, won't, or don't. And this is why can't. First off, because Drill Sergeant said so, and Drill Sergeant doesn't fucking lie. Drill Sergeant would remind us when we were physically unable to do things, are you an American or an Americant? Because the last four letters of American are I can, right? And that's what a drill sergeant yells at you when you are physically, mentally, emotionally unable to perform the next thing, right? So that's where that stuck early in my military career. Here's why I can't. Because now you've taken away all of your personal responsibility for the thing. So give me an example. Let's play the game again of what is a sentence where you would normally say I can't?
I can't figure out how to start an LLC.
Sounds good. I can't figure out how to start an LLC. Okay. Do you want a company? Is that accurate to say? Okay.
Yes.
Who can? Who can figure out how to start an LLC?
The internet can point me in the direction of somebody.
Okay. Can you get on the internet today?
Yes.
Can you type in the words?
I hope so.
Okay. And can the internet deliver the information that is available?
Yes. Now,
okay, so look, okay.
I say I've done a lot of reflection over the past, part 3 of what you said over the past number of years, why I do this. A lot of this has to come down to my own fear of failure. If I don't do something, then I don't fail. Excuse me, then I don't fail. So I say I can't do it.
Yeah, when you don't do something, then you fail, right? When and then are more powerful than if and if.
You should read some Stanislavski. He talks about the magic if. That would really drive you nuts. I'm just kidding. No, he's an Russian acting guy. Theater, gotta bring up theater, man. Another thing you say that is part of my truth. No, I'm just kidding. You said being nervous is a great sign. Yeah, it shows you care, and that is a really empowering thing to think about, because I know a lot of people, obviously myself included, who get very nervous about certain things. It's because I care. That's a really wonderful way to frame that.
So I got nervous before this podcast. I get nervous every time I get on stage, right? I got my little fidget spinner thingy here. It's not really a fidget spinner. It's a
that looked like tie. What is that?
So actually I got this when I was leaving Iraq. It's a cable tie thing. So you can tie your cables off. Anyways, I have these things. I put them in my pocket or I have them nearby so I can twirl them. Because what happens with nervousness, right? So let's say nervousness is the 0 mark. Let's say that's the default. You're nervous, right? And then on one extreme, you can have anxiety, and the other extreme you can have excitement. Okay, so that is going to be our 3-part series here. If you put 3-part line, right? So it's very linear. Where do you fall on this line? Okay, so Harvard Business Journal did a study in 2001, and they determined that excitement and anxiety, it's the exact same chemical composition, that releases in your brain when you anticipate an upcoming event. The difference is if you anticipate a positive outcome, you get excitement. If you anticipate a negative outcome, you get anxiety. And so for you, even in your LLC endeavor, right, fear of failure, be like, you know what, hold on, positive. I'm going to figure this out. I got this, right? Other people have figured it out. I can do it. I'm a smart person. I'm going to figure it out. The internet has the answers. I am not leaving this desk until I figure out this LLC situation. I will reach out to anybody and everybody, and I am not going to let the fear of failure cripple me from moving forward in this endeavor.
How much do you think superstition has to do with what we choose and think?
None.
You don't think so?
No, here's what it is. If someone came up to me and said, I am a devout, name that religion, and somebody else said, I firmly believe in horoscopes and crystals and tarot cards, say, sounds good. How's that working for you? Oh, it's great. I think I read my horoscope every morning, and that's my motivation to do something new and different, exciting. Awesome. How is that any different than reading a Bible passage? I don't give a fuck what you tell yourself, how you tell it. Does it serve you? My mom loves horoscopes. My mom will be the first one to be like, oh yeah, I know it's stupid, it's garbage, whatever, but I read my horoscope every morning because that gives me inspiration. And my mom's a Catholic, right? So she ain't reading Bible verses first thing in the morning. She reads her horoscope. And that is the motivation she has. So it's not about superstition. It's about self-affirmation.
Well, let me clarify what I mean by superstition. I wasn't really going the religious route. I'm going to give you an example. Yesterday, Brent and I recorded another podcast, and we were in his truck, and we were driving, and he was kind enough to put on the Cubs game for me. Cubs were down 4-1. This is what I do, okay? Because I'm superstitious, I just always think they're going to lose, right? So I just like, motherfuckers, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. They're going to fuck it up, say all these things. And then they came back, okay, and they tied it. They ended up winning the game. They came back and tied it. I hit Brent very hard in the arm because I was very excited. But my superstition is I tell myself a story. You talk in the book about how the mind can't tell between fact and fiction. I tell myself a story that if I say they're not going to do it, it gives it a better chance of them doing it, or it helps me with being let down. So it's like magical thinking. Do you know that term?
No.
Magical thinking, it's an OCD thing. It's like you basically think my brain is controlling shit that it's not controlling. Okay. So that's what I mean by superstition is some people say, well, I'm probably not going to do very well, which again, you kind of get into in the book too. Then that means you're not going to do very well. But people do that as some sort of either to stop. I'll just speak for myself. I've done that many times to save myself from failure or because I was superstitious that things weren't going to go well. And I was afraid things weren't going to go well, and I was superstitious enough to say, if I say things won't go well, maybe the opposite will happen. It's a really fucking weird, tangled logic that makes no sense.
No. Here's the difference, though. Here's the way I'll quick discern it. You had no control over the Cubs game whatsoever. None, zero, zilch, nada. So that's pure garbage superstition, right? There's zero chance. It's new to me. I love gambling. I love going to Vegas. I love blackjack. I love craps. If I'm like, oh, that table's hot, in my head, I'm like, oh, it's hot table. So, or I'm rolling well. No, there's no data behind that. I do not control the dice, right? No different than you control the Cubs game. So that is garbage superstition. Right? Because you have no control over the Cubs. No different than I have control over the dice. Okay, so there's our superstitious garbage bucket. The other bucket of I have some level of control. How I show up matters. Then now we're talking a different thing. Right. So if you're getting excited, like even before this podcast, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to feel good. I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. I'm going to say, I'm going to have a great podcast today. I'm going to have a great podcast today. And maybe you have this like reverse engineer negative talk, like your fear of failure is the motivation. Like, hey, if I I'm going to fail. And so I got to do all these things to not fail. Right. Like I would say that I don't know if I'd write this in the book. It's one of my favorite lines is spite is a hell of a drug. Success is much more sustainable. Like I used to do things out of spite. I used to do things because people told me I couldn't, and I believed them. It's like, well, that didn't fucking work, right? And so that saying turned into a TEDx I did years ago called "Transform Your Pain into Passion and Define Your Purpose." I do talk about that in the book, and it's like, okay, so what are your pain points? If failure is your pain point, okay, so how do we transform that into a passion, leaning into pain or leaning into failure, and then your purpose? I'm going to go out and fail every day. I'm going to go out and take on things that I otherwise thought not possible. So if when you use this weird negative self-talk for good,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's what it is. It's like, I'm going to fuck this up. Oh, the Cubs are going to lose.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, well, that's a starting point, right? You talk about rock bottom. That's your rock bottom. Your rock bottom is that wounded child inside of you that says you suck, right? I get to this in the book. I'll tease the ending. I convinced myself for years that I was not good enough. I believed in, I have the word Nimrod tattooed on my arm, and in the Green Day album, Nimrod, right? The track "Nice Guys Finish Last." I convinced myself for years that if I'm a nice guy, right, I'm never going to get what I want out of this world, and that's why I had to be this hard ass dick of a soldier, because I had to be Billy Badass that goes overseas and gets some kills and right and makes a name for himself, because all the badass guys get what they want in this world. It's like, well, no, that wasn't true. That was my wounded inner child feeling like I wasn't good enough coming out. The fact is, I've always been good enough, even in the Army. I wasn't good enough for that level, that set of leadership at the time. But I'll tell you, now I have a really good career in the military because I found the right audience, and I learned to regulate my speech and my thoughts. And it's like, okay, looking back at it, right? Had I never said that leader was terrible at her job, I would have never got caught up in the mess I got caught up in. Mm-hmm. I'm the one that caused that, right? Did I think that? Absolutely. Was it true that she sucked at her job? Yeah. Would she have got removed from her position at the end of the day?
Or was it your perspective that she sucked at her job? Or was that like
correct. Okay, you're right. In November, December, when I said it, and I went through some shit.
Yeah.
Right. That my perspective was right to me, and nobody else saw it that way.
Right.
By the end of the deployment, the Army saw that perspective
with the investigation.
She was removed from her position.
Okay.
Right. Like, so, right. And there's plenty of times where my perspective was one thing and ended up being drastically wrong. Now, the beautiful thing about that is often people don't know about that.
Well, Nice Guys Finish Last, by the way, which is the first track on Nimrod, as I recall. Yep. I wanted to take a little moment here and just share a couplet of some of my high school poetry. Brent, write this down with your own blood, please. Which is, I wrote this shortly after listening to that song, and the last line of the poem was, "Nice guys finish last, and I'm not moving too fast." Bam! I mean, that's fucking gold. Just kidding. It's not gold, but that was my reaction to it, right? So you talked about how, if nice guys finish last, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to be, I think you said Billy Badass. I'm going to go over and do all these things. Earlier you brought up the lizard brain, and what's the doctor's name? I apologize. Who you speak about in the book?
Dr. Bill.
Dr.
Bill Crawford.
And in the book, you talk. I want to get to reacting versus responding, because let me tell you what I am a specialist at is reacting. I've gotten better at responding, but boy, I am a fucking 2-star colonel of reacting. I'll tell you that much. So tell me what you mean based on what you learned from Dr. Bill. Yep. The difference between reacting and responding.
Yeah. So here's the basis. Things happen near us, right? Not to us, not for us, near us, and then we decide whether it's for us or to us. So things happen near us. And so in the military and mass resiliency training, we call those activated events. And the way that the Army proposed it is you have this activated event, you have your thought, and then you have your reaction. And your reaction is consequences, or your emotions. And I didn't love that model because I didn't love the word reaction. And I agreed with the activated event and then thought. And the Army does talk about how your thought is rooted in language. And because we dream in language, we think in our native language, so therefore we can change the words within the thought and the language there, also there. So and then I learned about Dr. Bill, and I read his work, and I interviewed him. I had a few conversations with him, and I understood where he was coming from and what his theory is. It's like, okay, things happen near us. Our middle brain, our upper brain vision takes it in, right? And our middle brain discerns whether, okay, is this a threat or is this not a threat? Mm-hmm. And because we have negative comparison, and humans have negative comparison, right? That was the difference between Caveman Bill and Caveman Bob, right? Caveman Bill went over and touched the lava, fell in and died. Caveman Bob saw Bill and was like, hey, lava bad. So then Bob got to procreate, and all of Bob's descendants decided that lava was bad. and God, rest Bill's soul, because he'll never come back and he won't procreate. So we have this negative comparison, and now we live in a society where we have all these perceived threats. There's not saber-tooth tigers or a lava or mammoths that are chasing us down, and so now we have all these things that our brain interprets as real threats. And so what we have the opportunity to do now is to slow down, take in the information, things that are happening near us. Is this a threat to us, or is it not? If it's a threat and you need to do something, like if someone swerves at you in traffic and you got to get out of the fucking way, okay, let's turn. Right? If there's an avalanche coming to you, you ought to start running the other direction, or up a mountain, or whatever the math tells you when avalanches come through town. Most things that happen near us aren't a threat to our
Right.
life, right?
Exactly.
Life, limb, or eyesight, if you will. And so now we have to look at them as, okay, these are opportunities. These are happening near us. So how do I want to respond to this new stimulus? And what ends up happening when you are conscious, you don't let the heat of the moment, you don't let the heat of the moment thought come out, right? Because the heat of the moment thought is the first reaction, and learning to quell that for a hot second and take these stimulus, look at things holistically, have your top of your brain, your big brain process them, and now you're allowing the confident, creative brain ultimately make your decisions for you, right? And I've listened to this in language with people. I remember I used to work with homeless people all the time, and a lot of homeless people would say, "Oh, I got to do this and I got to do that." Homeless people are like the busiest people I've ever met, right? Because in their brain they convinced themselves there's all these things they had to do, and they were always in this fight, flight, or freeze mode. So they're constantly reacting to the next stimulus and reacting, and they never can put together a whole day's worth of an agenda, or a week, or a month, because they're constantly reacting to what's right in front of them, because their brain is really in fight or flight mode often. And so what happens is when you slow down and when you look at all the things that are happening around you, then you can start choosing, okay, I'm going to make this decision, which will lead to potentially better choice or better opportunities down later in life. And so when you have this opportunity and the luxury sometimes to take the time to make decisions, you are going to make a more clear, confident, creative decision versus the fight, flight, or freeze decision in the moment. We all have tendencies, fight, flight, or freeze. We all have a natural tendency. My tendency is flight. I walk away. I run away. I shut down from a situation.
Mm-hmm.
That is my natural tendency. And I know a lot of people that their natural tendency is to freeze, or is to freeze also, right? And they'll be sitting there, and it's like you're talking and they're not taking anything in. They're just so overwhelmed, and they're not in their head, and nothing. There is no computation going on. And then other people, the fighters of the world, right? Quick, fast, and hurry that they're reacting, because you'll see it, right? And you'll hear it, and they'll come right at you. And so how do you slow down? Stop yourself from having that heat of the moment thought, allowing the time to have your upper brain, your big brain, come up with a creative, clear, and confident decision versus this heat of the moment reaction.
And it has to be remembered that if you're somebody who reacts, and you want to change to become, somebody who responds, you're not going to get it right every time. And one of the problems I have is when I'm trying to make a change, if I don't get it right, then I just fucking pile on myself, and say, you piece of shit and all this stuff, which helps no one, serves nothing, because you're not giving yourself the grace that you need in order to make those changes. These changes can't happen overnight. I don't believe they can happen overnight. I really don't, because the brain's fucking intense, man.
The brain is hardwired for survival. Brain's first function is to keep you alive, and your brain cannot discern between real threats and perceived threats. So what you can do is, when you go into a situation where there is known stimuli, right? So I play volleyball. I love playing volleyball. I play volleyball 2-3 days a week. There are certain teams and certain people that do certain things that fucking set me off, and I will talk shit in the middle of the game. I'll flip people off in the middle of the game. My fight, flight, or freeze, then my fights, especially when I'm playing volleyball, kicks off, and let's fucking go. And that's not always healthy. So I have to go into volleyball saying, okay, I know I'm playing this team. I know they're going to do certain things that irritate me. I can choose how I respond to this situation. And so, knowing that, now I'm pre-programming my brain to, hey, default setting, don't tell them they suck at life. Default setting, step away for a minute and rally for the next point. Right? Don't get pissed off when they open hand tip. Like in sand volleyball, when people open hand tip, it's a bitch move. I fucking can't stand it. You know what? And my thing is, fine. When
what's an open hand tip? What does that mean?
So in volleyball, when you play sand, I used to play doubles, and there's very particular rules. When you play doubles, rules are particular, and then you play fours, and there's more lax rules, and then you play sixes, and people do what the fuck they want. So an open hand tip or a directional tip is more whatever, is when you poke the ball with your fingertips. Okay. And when you're playing sand is a slower game than court because sand is slow. And so when you tip, you either have to swing through it or use your knuckles or punch the ball, right? Not go up there and tip it open hand. And people will do that. Either they're court players or they're shit players. And when we play volleyball, this is bar league volleyball. You call your own shit. You're in the net, you call it. You call balls in and out, and 99% of plays, there's no argument. And then you have some guys that'll go up there and fucking open hand tip, and it pisses me off because it's subjective to a certain extent. What is the difference between an open hand tip and a directional tip and a closed hand tip? Now, me, I fucking swing hard every goddamn time, so I will not be accused of open hand tipping, because when you're playing, co-ed or even men's league volleyball, like, fucking hit hard. That's a rule and principle I live by. We went way off track from the book. Anyhow, when I'm going into these volleyball
we still
games,
use the word fucking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I go into these volleyball games where I know the other team is going to do things that irritate me, I can choose to react to them, or I can choose to preload a response, be like, yep, they suck. Right? I'm going to get the next one. Whatever I have to tell myself. So I don't tell them they fucking suck at life, because at the end of the day, it's bar league volleyball on a Tuesday at a shit bar in Wisconsin. Like, no one's hanging their hat on this. So often what will end up happening is I will say something to them, because I'm not an under the breath kind of person. And I'll be like, fuck you guys, like, this garbage, it's shit, whatever. And then after the game, I'll be like, yeah, kind of a dick on the court. Once we're off the court, I'm not a terrible human being. I don't apologize, right? Or apologizing isn't in my repertoire. I acknowledge that I'm kind of a dick on the court after the fact, right? And that's how we respond. And most people, now that they know that about me, they're like, oh yeah, whatever, that's Andy. He's a dick on the court. Now, doesn't make up for my behavior. It's me acknowledging it and me responding after the stimulus. And what ends up happening is I end up being less of a dick on the court because I've pre-programmed it. It happened. And then in retrospect, I acknowledge that wasn't me at my best self.
Gotcha. Okay. So I got two more questions for you. We teased it the whole fucking episode. What's your favorite 4-letter word?
Work.
Why is that your favorite 4-letter word?
Because it's a choice we can make all day, every day. Right now, for example, right? I'm putting the work in with my book. I put the work in to write the book, and now I'm putting the work in by talking to you. We met, right? We had an intro email, we had an intro call. I listened to Pinkerton this weekend.
Hell yeah.
Because it was part of our earlier conversation. And so I put the work in because that's controllable. And the challenge I have is a lot of people, the work has such a negative connotation. It's like, well, because what are you working towards?
You're right.
Everything in this world is work. Relationships are work. Are you putting the work in on the front end, or are you buying flowers in the back end because you fucked up? Right? With your job, if you hate what you do for work, let me tell you something. There's a job or a career or a position or a company you can start out there that will make you love your work. It's your choice to put the work in to find that position or place. It's this idea of victim language that people have, and that's really what the book is about. It's this victim language
versus victor. Oh,
absolutely.
We just said it at the same time. Go ahead.
Are you a victim of your circumstance, or are you a victor of your story or situation? I intertwine those words really. And it's a choice of being a victor. I'm putting the work in because the work is worthy. I love putting the work in. I love work because I'm working towards my goals, my dreams, my ambitions. I'm putting work in with the relationships that I want to put the work in with. When you put the work in, you get the results, or closer to the results that you desire. And work has this negative connotation. And I think that's ridiculous. That old adage, well, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. No, you'll work really fucking hard. I love telling people I'm unemployable. I'm unmanageable. I've been unemployed for 7 years. I ain't got no job. Let me tell you, it takes a lot of fucking work to not have a job. A job to me is an obligation. A job is a place I have to go. I have to wear their uniform. I have to say the things they want me to say, which is completely different than work. And where I work on my craft, I work on myself, I work on my relationships. It's all work.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
I think I love the reframing of that. I really do. And you know, the last thing, when we did meet before we came on here, after we talked about our shared love of Pinkerton and Bob Dylan and Green Day. By the way, on Pinkerton, when he says, I asked you to go to the Green Day concert, you said you never heard of them. How cool is that?
How cool is that?
One of the first things
El Scorcho. Scorcho. You know what? Here's
Go
the
ahead.
deal.
Yeah.
My favorite Weezer line is in that.
Tell me.
When he goes, God, I can't. And I ain't faking. Wait, I can't even look at you without shaking.
I ain't faking.
Bring home the turkey.
And you bring home the bacon. Yeah.
Boom. The favorite line of Weezer. Right. I can't even look in your eyes without shaking. And I ain't faking. I'll bring home the turkey if you bring home the bacon. That is my favorite Weezer line. Because it's one of those lines where it's like it's maybe some other people, it's like a throwaway line, but it's like what a slap of a stupid line. I'll bring home the turkey if you bring home the bacon. Like, let's fucking go.
Well, the first half of it too is showing vulnerability and saying
right? And I ain't fake. Yeah, right.
I'm shaking. I'm not making this up. I'm being my real self around you.
Absolutely. And then it's like, and look at the possibilities. And the other thing I found out about Weezer when I was listening to it, he uses the word "but" often. Because you're right, he's showing his vulnerabilities, but then it's like, but look the possibilities, right? And it goes with the weird, nerdy, self-defeating self that he has, and it's like, but then and he ends with this opportunity, right? And then he talks about that song is all about, I think you'd be good for me, and I'd be good for you, right? And it's like, what do you say? You know.
Yeah, and I hope everybody stays tuned for Kevin and Andy's podcast, Running Rivers, in which we speak about all the lyrics of Weezer. Okay, the last thing I wanted to say is because this is a really good. I have a voice in my head, not like a Sybil voice. The self-defeating talk, as we talked about.
Oh yeah,
and something I'm going to paraphrase you, but defeated language leads to anxiety and depression because you have no control. Now, I specialize in defeating language in my brain. It is constant. It is all consuming. I have been through 32 years of therapy. I'm a lot better. I can recognize it. As you said, self-awareness, all that good stuff, right? What do you say to somebody who just hasn't had the time, who hasn't even made the initiative to say, okay, this defeated language is leading to my anxiety and depression? Like, is it going back to what you said early in the episode about you need to be, one, aware of the language in your head? Yeah. Because my thing is, what's so fucked up is my defeatist language is, I sometimes think, has something to do with me trying to control the situation I can't control.
Yeah, you're putting energy in the wrong place. And you're giving credence to shit that has no place being credence, right? You're letting those thoughts live rent-free in your brain. So, right, self-awareness is one thing, but let's jump. Or self-awareness is one thing, right? So, right. So, yay, self-awareness. We're there. Now let's jump to self-regulation. So you have the book in front of you.
Yep.
I'm looking around for a copy of the book in my office. Of course, it's not nearby. And okay, go to I don't know what fucking chapter it is. It is it's one of the exercises at the end of the chapter.
Okay.
It's probably chapter. Here, hold on.
Do you want me to read it?
No. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the dang old. See, this is like in my head. I'm like, I was about to say like, oh, I don't have it nearby. I have this. The fuck. I have the goddamn book on a PDF, searchable.
Yeah.
On my desktop.
Yeah. You got a Control F.
Dude. Let me tell you something about Control F.
Okay. I'm ready.
I got through several, if not every military school I've ever been in with Control F. That's it.
Stay tuned for Andy's next book. Control F fucking matters.
Yeah, Control F fucking matters. All right, so I typed in so that. Here we go. This is the difference. So go to page on or about page 127.
127.
You'll go into 127 and then goes into 128.
Is this the one that has the anxiety, arousal, flow, control, relaxation, boredom? That's what I have for my one. Here's my 127. For those of you who are listening, obviously, I'm just showing him on the camera.
Yeah, there you go. Go to the end of chapter. Let's do it. Go to the end of chapter 12. I know it was towards.
Yes. Okay.
Here we go. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to reframe your victim statement.
Mm-hmm.
So the page so right before the end of it. What you want to look for is shedding limiting beliefs. So go about 2 or 3 pages before the end.
Shedding limiting beliefs. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Got it. I'm here.
Okay. So here we go. So acknowledge the belief. You said that you started that off right off the bat, right? So let's in your sentence, you've done this. Acknowledge the limiting belief. You said you got a part in your brain as a real motherfucker.
Yeah.
Right. That person, that avatar of you is defeating and limiting. Right. Okay. So we've acknowledged that. Now, second thing, you questioned it. Right. Is this belief serving you? You already said it didn't. So you already did that.
Mm-hmm.
Third thing, challenge it. Now contradict the belief. You did that. You said, I have 32 years of therapy. Right. That says that thing is not serving me.
Right.
So now, fourth thing is change it. So this is where you're at now. So your victim statement was, say it again. What was your victim statement?
I have a voice in my head that is always telling me that I'm bullshit and is constant.
I love it. Because the other word you use without me even asking you is another bullshit word, always and never. When you use the words always and never, you are limiting other possibilities. Right? Because I guarantee you would not have a podcast if this voice always won out.
It's true.
This voice does not always win out. It might win more often than not. Not always, because if it was not always, you would be in the fetal position in the corner of your room. So here we go. Okay, so this statement you made, say it again. Victim statement.
My victim statement is something along the lines of, I have a voice in my head that tells me everything I do is shit and it's constant.
Okay.
It's always
now
going. Yeah.
There we go. So now we're going to change this to your victor statement.
Ready.
What we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge, we need to acknowledge the previous belief. So now acknowledge that, factually speaking, get rid of the word always, because we've already proved that to be incorrect. So now let me acknowledge your previous belief.
I acknowledge that I have a voice in my head that is negative self-talk.
Okay. So now we're going to insert that. There's limited belief, right? I used to. So I want you to say it. I used to, and then give me that same limiting self-belief.
I used to have a voice in my head that is negative self-talk.
And now,
and
fill
now,
in the blank. And now, truthful adjustment. And now,
I'm going to, and now I am not going to give it the credence that that I've given it up until this point, or I'm going to change the way that I look at it.
There we go, right? Credence change, right? Because what you're doing is you're not feeding it, right? And now I no longer give it credence, so that what is the result you want?
So that I can continue to be confident in my own abilities and move forward in life.
Got it. Do you still have that limiting self-belief in your life?
Of course.
There you go. And you have the tools now to get the confidence, right? Because you're not going to give it credence. I'm not dismissing it. I'm not like, oh, come on, Kevin, you don't have that. Look at all these things you did. Oh, fuck that. That's just, no. Yes, you have a limiting self-belief. And now you've found a way to regulate it so that you get the result of the confident person that you know you are inside of you, because you have the two wolves. At the beginning of this chapter 12, it says, show up naked. What you did right now.
Don't take that literally, Brent.
Okay. That's fine. Whatever. Yeah. Right? You showed up naked. You told everybody on this podcast that you have a limiting self-belief.
Yeah.
And you are no longer going to feed that limiting self-belief so that you can be the confident person. That self-belief will remain with you the rest of your life.
I mean, I think that right there. Hold on, Brent, get my therapist on the phone. Tell her I'm done talking to her. No, I'm just kidding. Andy, I think I want to end on, I'm going to give you the floor before we end, but I want to end on that point because I think that I know it's near the end of the book, obviously. That is a really good summation. It is obviously not the whole book, right? There are great drawings of poop in the book. There's a drawing of a hockey stick. Did you do all the drawings?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
there's this woman named Jen out in Michigan. Awesome. Jen.
I like the
don't
drawings.
recall her last name.
Tell Jen that the drawings are awesome.
All right.
I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. As I said, the link to the book, to buy the book, will be in our the show notes. You know, as we close, is there anything else that you just kind of want to share, maybe that we didn't say, you want to reiterate, anything like that?
No, one alibi, Jennifer Cooper. That's the name of the woman. I checked my Google machine real quick. My Gmail, Jennifer Cooper, want to give credence to the right people. No, you know, what we said on the podcast was what was needed to be said and what we did say. There's the opportunity now is that people find systems within themselves and processes to enable them to live the lives they want to live. And the book I wrote, ultimately, I realized in retrospect, I wrote the book for myself. I wrote the book for me to understand better, how do I show up every day? I wrote the book as a constant reminder. Since I've released the book, there are times within my day that I say things that are inconsistent with my book, that I have negative self-thought or negative or limiting self-belief. And I reference back to my book. I struggled understanding the world and the people around me. And I wrote a book to better write down the rules that I've lived by that proved to be true. And I gave them the rest of the world to use. I wrote this book for me more than anybody, to better understand the world around me. My mom, almost all my life, I've said, you know, why are people so difficult? Well, because they're fallible. They're not processes. They're not systems. They're not an Excel spreadsheet where everything ties out at the end. And so I failed, 4 years of high school. I failed 4 English classes. And it's because I convinced myself that I wasn't a writer. I convinced myself that my ideas weren't valid. And once I reframed my language, I started changing that. And so I ultimately wrote this book selfishly for me to better understand the world around me. And so that's where I want to leave you with, that this idea that I got it all fucking figured out is absolutely untrue. And this idea that I'm an expert writer, no, or that I'm an expert person that understands people, and I always did. No, I continue to this day to struggle understanding people. And there's 8 billion of us on this planet. And if I want to live a fulfilling life, or when I want to live a fulfilling life, I'm going to interact with them. And so I find it interesting that even in me, and I didn't realize this until after the book was done, I took a pain point, my difficulty understanding people, and I turned it into a passion, which is language, because 93% of communication is nonverbal. I understand the 7% that's verbal, and I've said it for years. And so instead of sitting on top mountaintop and yelling and screaming, my purpose has been to acknowledge that I need support understanding people, and there's other people out there like me that need more support understanding people. And it's through language that I understand that I can share that talent with the world. And so for everybody out there, right, this is the Sad Times podcast. There are difficult times. There are sad times. Facebook and LinkedIn, we all know that these places are a highlight reel of the best times of your life. The reality is that most of life is a struggle. It is difficult. And when you put the work in, you can live the life that you want.
That's a great way to end. So we're going to end right there. Andy, thank you so much, man. This was a really stimulating, really good conversation. And I really appreciate your time today. And like I said, the book is called Words Fucking Matter. Retrain your brain to use language that serves you. And I'll end the same way that I always try to end these episodes, which is just a reminder that there's always room for kindness and grace, especially when dealing with yourself. I forget that every day, and I try to remember it. And we'll see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to a Fourth Hand Joint.